Dr. Halloran didn't reach for the phone. He didn't call a nurse in or set the chart down hard on the counter. He just went quiet. He read the page in his hand a second time, slow, the way you read something when you're hoping the words rearrange themselves into something kinder. Then he looked up at me, and for the length of 3 or 4 full breaths, he said nothing at all. 3 or 4 breaths is a long stretch when there's a 6-year-old asleep against your chest. It's longer still when that 6-year-old is your granddaughter, and you drove her here on a hunch you were praying you were wrong about. Sir, he said finally, and his voice had gone careful, level, the way a man talks when he's already decided something and is just choosing how to say it. How long has she been drinking out of that juice box? Maisie was 6. She'd turned 6 in the spring. She was dead asleep against my shoulder there in the exam room off Commissioner's Road, not the soft kind of sleep a kid falls into in a warm room after a long day, but the heavy kind, the boneless kind, the kind that doesn't belong on a Wednesday at 4:30 in the afternoon. I looked down at her face and then back at the doctor. I don't know, I told him. That's why I brought her in. Welcome to Dad's fierce revenge. Pour yourself a coffee and settle in, because every person you're about to meet in this story had 100 chances to do right and chose otherwise every single time. If you've got room in your heart for a little justice, do me a favor and tap that like button, leave a word in the comments, and hit subscribe so the next one finds you. Now let me back this truck up and start where it really started. I'm 71 years old. I spent 41 of those years as a Finnish carpenter, stairs and cabinets and trim. The kind of work where the whole point is that nothing you do should ever be noticed. A good staircase doesn't creak. A good joint doesn't show. You learn a thing in that trade that follows you the rest of your life. Something can look perfectly solid on the outside and be rotted right through underneath, and the only way you ever find out is the day it gives. By then, it's usually too late to save it. Sometimes you save it anyway. That takes patience and a steady hand, and I've got both, even now. I live in Byron on the west side of London, in the same little brick bungalow my wife Marion and I bought in 1979. Marion passed 3 years ago this December. My son lives 20 minutes out in Komoka with his wife and my granddaughter. My son's name is Mitchell. Everyone calls him Mitch. He's a good man, works too hard, travels for a logistics company out of the South End, and he loves that little girl more than his own breath. I want you to hold on to that because it matters later. Back in October, I had my hip replaced. The left one, the one I'd been arguing with since I fell off a scaffold in '98. I was laid up for the better part of 3 weeks, shuffling around the house with a walker, feeling about 110 years old. And that's how I came to miss the grandparents' tea at Maisie's school. It's a little thing they do for the kindergarten and grade 1 classes. You go in, you have a juice and a cookie at a tiny table, the kids show you their drawings. Marion would have loved it. I'd had it circled on my calendar for a month, and I missed it, lying flat on my back with my leg up on a stack of pillows, because I couldn't drive, and I couldn't sit in one of those little chairs, and I couldn't have gotten up out of it if I had. It ate at me more than the hip did. I kept picturing her looking at the door for me and the door not opening. So the second I was cleared to drive, I made a plan. I'd swing by the school's little fundraiser shop, pick up the shirt she'd wanted, and then I'd go out to Komoka and take her for a treat, and let her tell me every single thing about the tea I'd missed. Just be her grandpa for an afternoon. Make it right. It was a Wednesday in early November, cold already, that gray London cold that gets into your knuckles, freezing rain starting to spit against the windshield as I came up the 402. Funny how the most ordinary day you ever planned can turn into the one you'll be turning over in your head for the rest of your life. I pulled into the driveway a little after 3. My daughter-in-law's name is Tessa. She answered the door with her phone pressed to her ear, gave me a flat little smile and a wave of her free hand, and stepped back to let me in without really looking at me. She's up in her room, she said, with her hand over the phone, and then she turned and walked back toward the kitchen, already talking again. Low, the way you talk when you don't want a thing overheard. I stood in the front hall a second with the gift bag in my hand, feeling like exactly what I was. An old man 3 weeks late, trying to buy back a morning he'd lost. I went up. Maisie's room is the first door at the top of the stairs. She'd made a sign for it herself, crooked marker letters, Maisie's room please no K. I knocked. Maisie bug, it's Grandpa. There was a long pause, then some shuffling. Then the door came open and she stood there in her socks and something cold went straight down through my chest, colder than the rain outside. She didn't look sick exactly, no runny nose, no flush. She looked heavy. Her eyes were slow to land on me, like they had to travel a long way to get there, and when they did, they didn't quite focus. She was leaning on the doorframe the way you lean on something when standing up on your own feels like a lot to ask. "Hi, Grandpa," she said, and even the smile came out late, a half second behind where it should have been, like a phone call with a bad connection. "Hey, Bug." I got down to her level, slow, my new hip complaining the whole way. "Sorry I missed your tea. I brought you something. It's okay." She blinked at me. "I'm just real sleepy." Sleepy. It was 3 in the afternoon. I gave her the bag and she opened it the way you'd open a present in slow motion, peeling the tissue back a piece at a time. When she pulled out the stuffed moose I'd found, she smiled for real this time, the whole face lighting up, my Maisie underneath, whatever was sitting on top of her. "I'm gonna call him Pancake," she said. "That's a perfect name for him." She held the moose up and looked at him a long moment, the way kids study a thing they've already decided to love forever. Then she set him down in the exact center of her pillow, careful, like she'd been saving the spot, and she went still, quiet in a way that wasn't sleepy. The kind of quiet a kid gets when she's working herself up to say something. I waited. "I've raised one of these. You wait." She crawled over and put both her little hands flat on my knee and leaned in close, the way she only does when she wants to be sure no one but me can hear it. "Grandpa," she whispered, "can you ask Mommy to stop putting the sleepy stuff in my juice box? It makes my head feel all heavy and I don't like it." I want to tell you the room spun. It didn't. I want to tell you I grabbed her shoulders and made her say it twice. I didn't do that either. I just nodded, slow once, like she'd told me she didn't care for peas. "Okay, baby," I said. "Let's you and me go for a little drive." 41 years in the trades teaches you when something's wrong before your brain has the words for it. You can't always hear it. Sometimes you just feel it in the wood, a give that shouldn't be there, a wrongness under your palm. Your hands know before your head does. My hands knew. I went downstairs with her hand in mine. Tessa was at the kitchen island, still on the phone, laughing now, a bright, easy laugh, her back to us. "I'm taking Maisie for a hot chocolate," I said. "Little treat. Just us." "Sure, yeah, that's fine," she said over her shoulder, not turning around. She never once looked at the kid. I buckled Maisie into the booster seat in my old GMC, Pancake the moose tucked under her arm, and I pulled out of that driveway doing the speed limit exactly, all the way down Glendon and onto the highway. I didn't call Mitch. Not yet. I didn't call anybody. First, I needed to know what I was actually dealing with, the way you've got to open up a wall before you can say what's behind it. There's an after-hours pediatric clinic off Commissioners that Maisie had been to twice before for ear infections, and the same doctor had seen her both times. Dr. Halloran. He'd been straight with me both visits, never talked down, never gave me the "well, Grandpa, kids are kids" routine. He knew her chart. I told the front desk it was urgent, and I sat down across from him, and I told him exactly what she'd said, word for word, the whisper, the slow eyes, the way she'd moved all afternoon like she was wading through deep water. He didn't give me the look I was braced for, the one that says you're an old man overreacting. He looked at Maisie, who was sitting up on the exam table by then eating crackers out of a paper cup like it was the most normal Wednesday of her life, and he ordered a full panel. Urine, a tox screen, the works. 40 minutes, give or take, he said. We waited. Around the half-hour mark, she climbed down off the table, crawled up into my lap in the chair, put her head on my chest, and went out like a light. Just gone, switch flipped. I sat very still, and I stared at a poster of the food groups on the wall, and I thought about her standing in that doorway holding herself up against the frame, and I thought about how I'd almost waited until the weekend to come out. How I'd told myself I should rest the hip another couple days. What if I had? What if I'd waited? The door opened. Dr. Halloran came back in with the page in his hand. He read it, looked at me, and went quiet for those 3 or 4 long breaths. And then he asked me how long she'd been drinking out of that juice box. "What's in it?" I said. He sat down. He turned the page around so I could read it for myself. Diphenhydramine. You'd know it as the stuff in the pink allergy tablets at the Shoppers, the kind that makes adults drowsy and is sold to make kids stop sneezing. Safe enough at the right dose for the right reason. But the page said the concentration was, in his words, consistent with repeated administration over a sustained period. Not once. Not an accident with the cough syrup. Repeated. Sustained. I read that line 3 times. Then I folded my hands on my good knee and I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth, the way the physio lady taught me for the pain, and I used it for something else. Her mother's at home right now? Dr. Halloran asked, quiet. She is, sir. I'm legally obligated to report this to the Children's Aid Society today. I know you are, I said, and I met his eyes. Give me until tomorrow morning, please. Let me get her somewhere safe and proper first. I'm not going to do anything stupid. I'm asking you to trust me for one night. He studied me a good while. Whatever he saw, it must have told him I wasn't going to drive out there and put my fist through a wall, even though there was a part of me that wanted to take that whole house apart, stud by stud. 8 a.m., he said. If I haven't heard from you that she's safe and that the process is moving, I make the call myself, and I tell them everything. He paused. Get her out of that house tonight. That was always the plan, I said. I carried her out to the truck and buckled her in, and Pancake went under her arm. The drive back to my place in Byron took 22 minutes in the freezing rain, and I counted every one of them. She slept the whole way, mouth open a little, breathing slow and even, one hand wrapped around that moose, holding on to the one good thing even in her sleep. I didn't phone a soul. I drove the limit and I let the quiet do what quiet does, which is sort things into order. I thought about the gift bag and the 3 weeks I'd spent feeling guilty about a school tea. While the whole time, right under all our noses, something 100 times worse than a missed cookie had been happening to that little girl in that house. I made up the spare room for her, the one that used to be Mitch's. I sat in the hall with the door cracked and the lamp low, and I listened to her breathe, and I started doing what I do. What do I know? What do I need to know? What's the right order to find it out? Because here's the thing about discovering you've been betrayed by someone who was supposed to do the protecting. The worst part isn't the anger. The worst part is the inventory. Going back over every moment you waved off, every time you told yourself it was nothing, every quiet alarm you reached over and shut off because you trusted the wrong hands. If you've been with this channel a while and you haven't subscribed yet, take the half second now. It costs you nothing, and it's the only thing that keeps these stories coming. Tap the like, drop a comment, tell me what you'd have done in my work boots. Now let me tell you how I built the case. The next morning, Thursday, I phoned Mitch at 6:45. He's an early riser, gets that from me. I didn't tell him a thing, not yet. I needed to hear where his head was first. Hey Dad, everything okay? Everything's fine, son. Listen, you notice anything different about Maisie lately? A pause. The kind that means he's actually thinking and not just being polite. She's been sleeping a lot, honestly. A ton. Tessa figured she's just in a growth spurt. Another pause. Why? Growth spurt. I kept my voice even. No reason. Just had her overnight, got me thinking. Hey, what would you say to her stopping with me a week or two? I missed that whole tea thing I owe her. Grandpa time. I could hear him smile down the line. Dad, she'd be over the moon. Let me square it with Tessa. Appreciate it, son. I hung up and sat with it. Growth spurt. My boy had looked his own daughter in her slow, heavy eyes and filed it under growth spurt because his wife told him to, and he was 3 provinces away, half the time keeping that mortgage paid. That's not a bad father. That's a man with a blindfold on, and there is a difference, and I needed to keep remembering the difference because the anger wanted to forget it. By 9, I was sitting across a desk from a family lawyer named Diane Halvorson, downtown on Dufferin, a woman a friend had used through an ugly divorce and never stopped recommending. I laid it all out. The clinic visit, Dr. Halloran's report, the talk screen I'd photographed on my phone before we left. She put on her reading glasses and didn't say one word for what felt like a long time. You understand what this is, she said. I think I do. Failure to provide the necessaries of life, administering a noxious substance. Possibly aggravated, depending on how long it's been going on and what the intent was. She took the glasses off. Who else knows? You, the doctor. Me, your son? Not yet. She nodded slowly. Good instinct. When a man hears something like this about his wife, his first move is denial. You want it so airtight that denial isn't on the table. She leaned forward. Here's the order of operations. The child does not go back to that house. You've got her, you keep her. We'll paper it today with an emergency motion and loop in Children's Aid, so it's on the record and on their terms, not just yours. You go to that clinic and you sign the consent so the report goes in properly. Then we build the rest. Medical records, pharmacy records, if we can pull a trail, a timeline, and I'd want a licensed investigator on the financial side and the home, because in my experience, the drugging is never the whole story. There's always a why, and the why is usually money or another person, and often both. She slid a card across the desk before I could ask. Glenn Marsh, a retired OPP officer who did private work out of a little office on Warncliffe. He's careful, she said, and he doesn't make noise. I asked her the question that had been sitting on my chest. The doctor wants to know she's safe by 8 a.m., or he reports it himself. Let him report it. That's not a problem, that's a witness. We want the society involved. The only thing I didn't want was you sitting on a drugged kid in that house overnight, and you didn't. You did this exactly right. She started writing. Now, your son. Before you go to him, you want the file thick enough that he can't talk himself out of it. Can you manage that? I built a case file the same week I built her crib, I said. I can manage. People asked me later, in the comments and to my face, who was watching that little girl while I was running around to lawyers and meeting investigators in coffee shops. Fair question, so here's the plain answer. Maisie stayed with me the whole time, and she went to school the whole time, because routine is the kindest thing you can give a frightened kid. I'd registered as her emergency contact years back, so the school never blinked when Grandpa signed her in. My neighbor 2 doors down, a retired teacher named Glennies, sat with her after school the 2 afternoons I had appointments, with the door open and pancake on the couch and a plate of those President's Choice cookies between them. The children's aid worker, a soft-spoken man named Aaron, came by twice that first week and saw exactly that, a clean, warm house and a little girl getting her color back, and he wrote it all down. I never once left that child alone, and I never once left her with anybody I hadn't known for 30 years. You don't pull a kid out of a fire and then go set her down somewhere else careless. Mitch called back at 11:30. Tess is all for it, he said, and he laughed a little. She said it'd be good for Maisie to have a change of scenery, called it a chance for some bonding. Bonding? She'd handed her own daughter over for 2 weeks without one question. Didn't ask what we'd do, didn't ask about bedtime, didn't get on the phone to say goodnight, sweetheart. Filed that away with all the rest. Glenn Marsh phoned me Saturday evening and asked could I meet him at the Tim Hortons on Wonderland in 20 minutes. He was there in 15, a stocky fellow with quiet gray eyes, the kind of man you'd look straight past in a crowd, which I expect is the whole point of him. He bought a double-double, sat down, and slid a folder across the laminate table between us. I opened it. The first thing in it wasn't a photograph. It was bank records, and I'm a carpenter, not an accountant, but Glenn had circled things in red, and you didn't need a CPA to read red circles. A line of credit on the house, drawn down to nothing. A second one I'd never heard of. And then the one that made my hands go cold on the coffee cup, colder than the rain on the window. Maisie's RESP. The education account Marion and I had opened the week that baby came home. The one we'd been quietly feeding $200 a month into for 6 years so she'd never have to start her life owing anybody anything. It had been drained, cashed out over the past 8 months in pieces, the way you do when you're hoping nobody's watching the statements. And after that, a small trust Marion had left specifically for the girl gone the same way. Where'd it go? I asked. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Glenn wrapped both hands around his cup. Online gambling, most of it. One of those casino apps. Hundreds of small charges, all hours, the worst of them between 11 at night and 4 in the morning. He let that sit because he understood what it meant. The hours a child should be asleep. The hours a child would be asleep if you made sure of it. And some of it, he went on, went to a man. Fellow named Devlin Crane. Met him through the app's chat, by the look of it. He's got a record for this exact thing, getting his hooks into people who are already drowning and helping them drown faster. She's sent him better than $9,000 since the spring. I sat there a long while, and Glenn let me. He didn't rush me, didn't fill the quiet. He drank his coffee and let an old man sit with a thing no grandfather should ever have to sit with at a Tim Hortons on a Saturday night. She hadn't done it out of cruelty. That was the part that finished me. If she'd hated that little girl, I could have understood it the way you understand a storm. But she didn't hate her, she just needed her quiet. She needed the hours, and the kid was always there, always awake, always bright and loud and wanting things. So she put her to sleep so she could chase a feeling on a phone and a man who didn't exist. She'd traded that baby's future, the actual money meant to send her to school, for spins on a screen, and somehow that was so much worse than hate. What does this Crane fellow know about Maisie? I asked. That she's a handful. That's what your daughter-in-law tells him. He's never once asked a follow-up. Glenn turned his cup a quarter turn on the table. Some people are very good at not asking the question that would make them responsible for the answer. I closed the folder. Glenn, I need every bit of this documented. Dates, amounts, the man, all of it, tight enough to hand a judge. Already most of the way there, he said. I drove home up Warncliffe with the window cracked an inch despite the cold, just to feel the air. London in November smells like wet leaves and wood smoke and the river. Maisie was asleep at my place, the real kind now, the natural kind, with Glennie's keeping an ear out and the porch light on. I sat down at my kitchen table that night, the same table I've eaten at for 45 years, and I opened the spiral notebook I used to keep my job estimates in, and I started writing it all out by hand. Every date, everything Halloran told me, everything Glenn had just handed me, in order, in my own writing, in pen. Then I phoned Diane Halvorson and left a message. We're ready. And then I phoned my son and I said just one thing. Mitch, I need you to come out to my place tomorrow. Just you. Come hungry. He came Sunday evening in that gray Honda he keeps too clean, walking up my driveway in his coat looking like a man who'd been called over for a roast and a hockey game. He had no idea. Maisie was already asleep in the back room, and I'd made sure of it, because what was about to happen at my table was not for a 6-year-old's ears. Not that night. Not ever if I could help it. I'd made a pot roast. Marion's recipe, with the carrots and the little potatoes, and a pan of cornbread on the side. I'd made that exact meal for Mitch every single time life had taken a swing at him. The night he didn't get into the program he wanted at Fanshawe. The night his first business folded when he was 30. He never knew it was a pattern. I never told him. Some things a father just does, and the doing is the whole point. Smells like Mom's in here, he said, hanging up his coat. Where's the bug? Down for the count. She's been doing great. Getting her color back. He smiled. Good. She needed the rest. He needed it too, I thought. But the rest he needed was a different thing entirely. We ate. I let him finish. I let him have the second helping and the last of the cornbread and a refill on his iced tea. I let my son be comfortable one more time before I changed the shape of his whole life. Then I got up, went to the counter, and I laid 3 things down in front of him. The medical report. The pharmacy and bank records Glenn had pulled, with Diane's red flags on them, and the folder with the photographs in it. And I sat back down and I did not say one word, because I taught him to read the evidence before he reads the man, and now it was time for the evidence to do the talking. He picked up the medical report first, slow, the way you pick up something when you're not sure you want to know what it weighs. His face didn't crack, it just went still, the way the river goes glassy and flat right before the surface breaks. He set it down, he read the bank records, and I watched him find the RSIP line, watched him find his mother's trust, and I watched something move behind his eyes that I'll be honest with you, I hope I never see on my boy's face again. Then he opened the folder. He got 2 photos in and he closed it. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the fridge running. Then Mitch stood up, slow, controlled, and said, "Give me a minute, Dad." And he walked down the hall to the washroom and shut the door. I sat at that table and I waited. Take your time, son. Take all the time in the world. He was in there a good while, long enough that I poured myself another tea and the clock over the stove ticked through 7-8 minutes. When he came back, his eyes were red and his voice was dead level. He sat down and looked at the folder without touching it. Does she know? He asked. Maisie. Does she know what was in the juice? No, I said. She just knows it made her head heavy and she didn't like it. That's all she knows. He nodded once, slow. Good. His jaw went tight. She doesn't need to carry more than that. Not yet. And right there I saw my son. Not the man with the blindfold. Not the fellow who'd filed his daughter's slow eyes under growth spurt and gone back to his spreadsheets. The father underneath all the travel and the trust he'd handed to the wrong person. He was still in there. He just needed somebody to walk up and put the truth in his hands. How long have you known? He asked. Since Wednesday. You've been sitting on this since Wednesday. It wasn't quite an accusation. I needed it airtight before I handed it to you. I wasn't going to give you something you could spend a sleepless month talking yourself out of. He was quiet. Then he let out a breath that was almost a laugh, the kind with no humor in it at all. You built the whole staircase before you let me see it. Force of habit, I said. He looked at the folder one more time. Then he pushed it gently to the side and pulled out his phone. I need Diane Halvorson's number, he said. And I knew right then my boy was going to be all right, and so was that little girl asleep down the hall. He didn't go charging out to Komoka that night or the next day. Diane had been clear, and so had I. You move methodical or you don't move. He stayed with me, slept in his old room, ate breakfast across from his daughter, and watched her carry Pancake the moose around my kitchen, and didn't say a hard word in front of her, just watched, storing it up. He met with Diane twice. He quietly moved what was left of the joint money into an account in his name only. He photographed every document in the home office on a morning Tessa was at her spin class. He did it all careful, no wasted motion. He learned that from somewhere, I suppose. He sat down from her on a Tuesday morning, after I'd driven Maisie to school myself, and signed her in, and watched her hang her little coat on her little hook. He told me about it that evening, word for word, and I'll give it to you the way he gave it to me. She was at the island on her laptop when he came in, and she looked up and smiled, normal as anything. He sat down across from her and slid the medical report across the granite. She read it, and the smile came apart in real time. She started talking right away, which Diane had told us she would, going straight to explaining instead of asking what he already knew. That's how you know. The guilty ones explain. Mitch, I can explain. She's been having such trouble sleeping, and He let the quiet sit there a good 10 seconds. Then he put the bank records on the counter. Then the photos. She looked at the RARESPIC statement, and at the trust his mother had left, and at the picture of a man named Devlin Crane, and she went completely still. I trusted you, Mitch said, and he never raised his voice once, not one time. With my daughter. With my mother's money. With our whole life. He stood up. You spent all 3. Mitch, please, she's my daughter too, I would never. You drugged her, he said, still calm, still level, for months. So you could be on that phone at 3 in the morning. Whatever story you have to tell yourself to live with that, you go ahead and tell it. It's yours to carry. It's not mine. He picked up his keys. Are you going to take her from me? She asked. He stopped at the door, turned around one last time. You already did that, he said. I'm just doing the paperwork. And he walked out. Now I'll tell you how it ended, and I'll tell you the real way, not the way they do it in the movies, because real justice in this country doesn't come with swelling music. It comes with court dates and caseworkers, and a great deal of waiting in beige hallways. But it comes. It came. The Children's Aid Society's investigation went exactly where the evidence pointed. Mitch was granted emergency temporary custody within the week. Full custody made permanent through the family court after that. Her lawyer tried stress, tried mental health, tried a gambling addiction as a shield instead of an admission. Diane Halverson put Dr. Halloran's report on the record. She put the talk screen in front of the judge. She put 8 months of pharmacy purchases and bank statements on the table, the drained RARESP, the drained trust, the timestamps that lined up the small hours casino charges with the nights a 6-year-old slept like the dead. The judge did not need much convincing. And here's the part that people watching always want to know, and I understand why, because I wanted to know it too. Was she charged? Yes. She was. The Crown took it up. Failure to provide the necessaries of life and administering a noxious substance to a person under 16. She pleaded down in the end, the way they do, but it stuck. A criminal record, a conditional sentence, mandatory treatment, and restitution she'll be paying back into that girl's name for a long while yet. Supervised visits only, and only if Maisie ever decides she wants them, which is a decision that belongs to her and nobody else. As for Devlin Crane, when the investigators turned up at his door, he folded like a cheap lawn chair. Gave them everything, dates, screenshots, the lot, anything to keep himself clear of it. The man who'd helped empty a child's future handed her mother over without a flicker the moment his own skin was on the line. The coward did one useful thing in his whole life, and it was that. The house in Komoka sold in the settlement. The line of credit ate most of it. Last I heard she was in a basement apartment off Hamilton Road, and the careful life she'd built and photographed and posted just so had come down the way these things come down. Not in one crash, but quietly, board by board. Maisie's 7 now. She lives with her dad full-time and she's got her color back and then some, loud and bright and asking 100 questions a day, the way a truly alive kid does. She still sleeps with Pancake the moose. She started a new RSPEP, the 3 of us did, the first week the custody came through. And I put in the first $200 myself, in cash, at the counter, and I made sure to tell the teller out loud what it was for, just because I wanted to say it. Marion would have liked that. I think about that whisper most nights still. Both her hands on my knee, the sleepy stuff in my juice box. 6 years old, and the only person in that whole house who told the truth about what was happening to her was her. If you take one thing from an old carpenter, take this. Pay attention to the little ones around you. Look at them. Really look. They are carrying things they don't have the words for yet, and they will hand you the whole truth in a whisper if you're paying enough attention to hear it. I almost wasn't. I almost waited for the weekend. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. If it moved you, hit that like, leave me a comment, and subscribe so the next story finds its way to you. I'll see you on the next one.